On this Horror Timelines list, we are going back in time to the 80s, a time when slasher movies ruled the box office and dominated the video shelves, and these movies were so prevalent that there's quite a few that got a little bit lost in the shuffle. So today on this list, we're checking out 10 of them that I just don't see talked about as much as I do the others, and some of these movies, you're gonna see why.
Number 10. We are starting out in the late 80s with 88's 555, and if you were in a video store as a kid, you remember this cover. It was because of this cover that I think the film has been lost to time a bit, since pretty much every parent saw this and said, "Oh, you are not renting that." It's shot on glorious video and directed by Wally Kaz, his only IMDb credit, as he didn't do anything before this and hasn't done anything since. It starts with a murder and police investigation, and there's more killing, and how about this? The machete killing was one of the first special effects that I learned about. Tom Savini explained how he did it by cutting a hole in the machete for someone to put their neck into, and it looked like the machete was actually in your neck. I'm pretty sure that you're not supposed to pull the machete away to show the freaking cutout section, though. For most of the movie, it focuses on the police investigation and a reporter, but occasionally cuts to the killer sharpening his knife. He's supposed to look like a hippie from the 60s, but he really just looks like a guy with long hair and a beard, and that shot from the cover does happen, and it's a pretty cool effect, but it's shot really poorly. Turns out that similar murders have occurred every 5 years in different cities that happen to match where their main suspect has lived, but is he their guy? It's a bit dull at times, but I still got a kick out of it. It sure as hell doesn't live up to the promise of that glorious box cover, and it's not good, but I don't know, it just felt like an interesting throwback to a day gone by for me. Number 9. Alright, it is time to talk about the insanity that is 1983's Mad Mutilator, also known as Ogroff. It's from France and has this masked lumberjack who just kills people in his woods. It was made for very little money, and it shows, since the film was the concept of a video store owner who made the film with the intention of just selling it in his store, and it features this pretty badass box art. There's very little dialogue in this film, and it's one of the most amateurish things that I've ever seen. It's like watching someone's backyard Super 8 movies, and it's hard to recommend because it's not a good movie. If anything, it's a terrible movie. Really terrible, until the point of being this interesting curiosity and weird, time capsule thing. It's weirdly hypnotic with some hysterically cheap effects, a chainsaw battle where a guy gets his leg cut off and he doesn't move an inch because, when someone is cutting into your leg with a chainsaw, you stay completely still like a mannequin. And then the lumberjack gets so mad at the chainsaw that he kills it too. This is one of those movies that you have no idea why you're still watching, but then something ridiculously bizarro happens that you get pulled right back in again. Like when the killer keeps this woman alive because she resembles maybe his mom or something, but then she just rolls with it. And then, for literally no reason at all, at an hour in, it becomes a zombie movie. It's just so out there. There's even a vampire near the end of it. Because I'm not saying that you should watch it. I'm saying that some of you should watch it.
You know who you are.
Number 8. Next up, we're headed back to 1981 with Xray, otherwise known as Hospital Massacre, which starts off back in 1961 in that famous location, Susan's house.
You know Susan, right?
It has that one kid, that one that was in everything back in the 80s as the sassy brother or best friend, and he kills Susan's brother with a coat rack, I think. 19 years later, and she's now Playboy playmate and frequent Love Boat star Barbie Benton, and it's Valentine's Day, and when she goes to the hospital to pick up some test results, there's of course a killer on the premises, accompanied by this very Amityville kind of score. Her ex is obsessive, her doctor is a creepster, and this movie has more suspects than it knows what to do with. Everyone here is pretty unhinged, including the 3 old ladies that she shares her room with, one of which is clearly a man in a wig. This one is pretty standard 80s slasher stuff, but considering that means it's awesome, this is pretty enjoyable, even if the ending twist is both expected and unexpected. Expected because, well, we saw the opening of the film, and obviously that had to play into the ending, but there's a scene with the revealed killer walking into a room earlier, acting unaware of what's happening, and no one is around, so I guess he's pretending like he doesn't know the person he's looking for there is dead. Except no one is there, so who is he pretending for? Number 7. We're headed now to 1987 with Video Violence, one of the era's notorious SOV entries, which means shot on video, and it has the classic 80s home video look about it. It starts with the slowest bat attack ever and a glorious title card that, not very centered. So there's this video store in a small town, and this guy asks for
that chainsaw movie.
And this dude goes for pieces. How is that the movie you think of when someone says chainsaw movie? When the wrong tape is returned, what they find is a snuff film, but the police won't listen and his assistant disappears. The film bounces between Steve trying to figure out what's going on and psychos Howard and Eli, who film a torture show in their basement. And they try to reach the man they think was murdered.
And there seems to be some kind of discrepancy in your social security number. I was wondering if you could repeat that for me, please.
Oh, just a random caller asking you for your social security number. Nothing suspicious here.
Things escalate as it appears the whole town is insane killers, and this was pretty silly, fun stuff that I enjoyed quite a bit. I mean, I'll admit that it's pretty slow in the middle part, but it was enjoyable enough that I threw on its sequel, Video Violence 2, which came out 1 year later, and apparently Howard and Eli have been sending out their show as a pirate signal. And it seems to take itself a whole lot less seriously, including fake commercials. But there's just no story here. It's just a series of vignettes of killing people in the town, with the pirate show as sort of a wraparound. It's not as well put together and not as clever, but it's still entertaining and has a really, really out-of-the-blue finale that just doesn't make a lick of sense, but it did make me laugh quite a bit, and at least it tied it into the first one. Number 6. Alright, you'd think that doing this list would keep me safe from anything by Polonia or Ferguson, but no, we're going to 1987's Splatter Farm, the very first Polonia film, back when Mark was joined by his now late brother John. This is also shot on video, shot on what I'm assuming is $50.13, and I should point out that the brothers were 19 years old when they made this, and they star in the film as well, as they have their own unique speech patterns.
Last time I saw her was when I was 12 years old. Don't worry. The sea hag better not get on my case. That's all I have to say.
They go to spend the summer with their aunt, and she has this guy working for her named Jeremy, who has some sick hobbies, and there's plenty of gore at the level that you'd expect for the Polonia brothers, some of the props of which I think that Mark is still using to this day. Plus, their camcorder went into auto mode in mid-shot, flashing the warning on screen, and they kept it in, didn't do another take. And I tell you, compared to the fairly safe, weird, bad stuff that Mark is doing now, this one seems pretty interested in pushing boundaries a bit, crossing the line of good taste at quite a few points. And I should point out that Aunt Lacey keeps her dead husband in the cellar, and this is another one that I'm only recommending to a very specific portion of my audience, because it is a uniquely particular brand of homegrown horror, and you're basically watching high school kids make a horror movie, so keep that in mind. especially with how far the ending goes into gross out world. And hey, the next time that you throw on Amityville Island and you're wondering, I wonder what the director looks like fully frontally nude. Well, this movie has that answer. Of course, since I'm broken, I had to take a look at the recent 2020 sequel, Return to Splatter Farm, which is dedicated to John Polonia, co-director of the first, who died suddenly back in 2008, Todd Smith, who played Jeremy, who also died recently, as well as Marianne Costley, who played Aunt Lacey, which means out of the entire 4-person cast of the first film, sadly only one remains alive. It's a direct sequel since it says it's set 33 years after the killings, and Polonia regular Jamie Morgan is here, and Jeremy's still alive and killing, and this has more polish and style than expected from Mark. It's surprising. A group of people, all of whom will look familiar if you've seen any of these films, and yep, there's that guy, and that guy, and this guy who fills in for Todd Smith is Jeremy. And, compared to the first movie, it dropped like 75% of the sleaze factor and plays as a more straightforward slasher flick, but it's actually not too bad. It's way more watchable than the standard Polonia jammer and has a hilarious flashback to the first film with stand-ins with great wigs. And even though it's a step up from the normal Polonia stuff, it's actually a step down from the off-kilter charm of the original. Number 5. Okay, let's go back to a little more produced film, away from the backyard slashers, and check out Open House from 1987 from Bollywood director Jag Mundra. He's most well known for the classic Hack-O-Lantern, but we need to talk about this one as well. The movie starts with showcasing some Los Angeles properties that everyone says are expensive, and this house is told to be $900,000. This house. Let's take a look at what $900,000 gets you in Los Angeles today. Just for comparison, $900,000 adjusted for inflation is just about $2 million. Houses in Bel Air, where they say that the house is located now, go for no less than $3.5 million. Anyway, seems the killer is attacking and placing bodies in open houses, and Adrienne Barbeau is in this, so it's automatically my favorite on this list. And our killer has a sort of unique but pretty impractical weapon. He's taken a plunger handle and attached razor blades to the end of it. It doesn't really seem that intimidating, but I guess it's super effective.
I feel like the blades would fall out the second that you swung that thing, but okay.
So Lisa is with Radio Dr. David here, played by soap opera guy Joseph Bottoms, and the killings continue, and I love that this is a real estate company selling super expensive homes, and their yard signs are still hand-drawn. It's pretty standard stuff, but it's oh so watchable. It has a strange early 80s vibe, even though it was made in the late 80s, and has several Barbeau nude scenes, so there's that. It's sort of a mystery, but it's not a very satisfying reveal and doesn't live up to the weirdness that Mundra delivered on Hack-O-Lantern, but did I mention Adrienne Barbeau? Number 4. From 1991, we also have the completely underrated gem called Butcher, Baker, Nightmare Maker, directed by William Asher, most known for comedies like Beach Blanket Bingo and How to Stuff a Wild Bikini, plus creating the classic Bewitched TV show, here proving that he can do horror too by providing us with one of the wildest opening scenes I've seen in a long time, and an accident that clearly inspired Final Destination 2. The Queen of the Sixth Dimension is here as the aunt of young Billy, who gets custody of him when his parents die, and it's a very early role for little baby Private Hudson. The Stratford Inn's favorite maid is also here, and it looks like Cheryl has a murderous streak, but there's a detective on hand who might own a toy shop somewhere, as well as Buford Pusser. And it's a weird scene because she tries to say that the man she killed tried to rape her, and the police walk in and without really examining anything at all, just start accusing her of making it all up. It's kind of weird because they're right, but they really have no way of knowing that, so it comes off as being a little creepy. Speaking of being creepy, Detective Carlson thinks Billy is gay and was having an affair with both his gym coach and the murdered guy, so he thinks he killed him, and this is how he presents it.
Doesn't it bother you that he's a fag? Come, tell me, Billy, are you a fag?
And the weird part is, because this was the early 80s, there's no way to tell if the movie is presenting him as the hero or not. I mean, a few scenes later, he's also straight up asking a high school girl if she's having sex with her boyfriend, and then later still, he's got a suspect in his office and just has his gun on him, so yeah, I mean, he's a bad guy. Cheryl gets crazier and crazier, with Susan Tyrrell's performance being delightful as her incestuous obsession with her nephew causes her to spring into action to prevent him from being taken down for her crimes. The longer it goes on, the nuttier it gets, and it's like one part slasher flick, one part misery, a dash of psycho, and it's really enjoyable, zooming into a pretty unpredictable finale. Number 3. Now, we head all the way back to 1982 for Girls' Night Out from director Robert Duvall, and outside of some documentary stuff, this was also his only feature film. We have a college that's exclusively populated by 30-year-olds, and Betty Childs is here, and we have a killer on the loose. There's a big costume party, but it doesn't seem to be Halloween, and they tell the local legend of psychopath Dickie Kavanaugh, and they're all going on this campus-wide scavenger hunt, and it may take a little too long to get going, since it takes until the half-hour mark to even start. Really? I mean, it's right around that time that Father Malone wanders in, and the killings start with our villain dressed in the team's bear mascot suit, using a bunch of blades like claws. He keeps calling the radio station to tease his identity, and it shifts a bit to a murder mystery, giving us some red herrings and a fairly surprising, although not exactly satisfying finale, and I loved this. I'm kind of shocked that it's not talked about more. I mean, it's a solid mystery, well made, has Hal freaking Holbrook in it, and even though it's sort of a typical slasher for the time period, it's significantly better than several other more notorious films from the same era. Seek it out, give it a shot. Number 2. Alright, here we go. It's the infamous Boarding House from 1982. A movie not enough people talk about. A movie with these as the opening credits. This is the only film by John Wintergate, and his only other IMDb credit is acting in the movie Terror on Tour, which I recently had in my heavy metal horror list. This was the first horror movie to be shot on video, setting the precedent for thousands with camcorders to follow suit. So there's this house called the Hoffman House, which had a series of bizarre accidents and deaths, and we have a killer that appears to have supernatural abilities. And Jim here inherits the house and is played by Wintergate himself, who is apparently not shy and has some powers of his own. I should point out that around 20 minutes in, there's really no narrative through line and no characters have appeared in more than one scene. It just kind of jumps from person to person until a group of young single women move into the cursed boarding house. Apparently, this film was re-released recently with the theatrical version, which I watched and is 98 minutes long, as well as a director's cut that runs 157 minutes. That's almost 3 hours long. So I'm missing out on stuff like this. And all the girls swoon over Jim, of course, and man, does this not make any sense. Take this, for example. This guy ends up lost and asks Jim to use his phone.
Sure, come on in.
And we literally cut to him lounging at the pool with the girls tossing him in. It's such an odd movie. Everything about it is wrong, but in the right way. In fact, Wintergate's vibe is pretty similar to Tommy Wiseau's, and this movie is almost like a prototype Room in that it's consistently goofily entertaining for every single wrong reason. I mean, look at this. How is that not hilarious? There's some mind-boggling odd stuff here. And lots of Jim in a Speedo. And this. I think it's safe to say that if you're into slasher flicks, I can't really recommend this. But if you're into movies that are just these weird, indulgent experiences, you have to see this one. It's such a weird vanity project.
Boy, you look funny.
Weird vanity project.
There's no plot, very little stocking for a slasher film, out of nowhere musical numbers, and the most confusing ending on this list.
Watch it. Or don't.
If you've gotten this far, you know how you feel about it. I mean, it boggles my mind that there's another hour of this out there, and I'm truly tempted to go find it. Number 1. And here we go, finishing with the film that I have seen some people talking about recently, and it's 1983's Blood Beat from Fabrice Ange Zafiratos. And again, this is his only IMDb credit and only film. So, it's Christmas time, and a family is getting together for the holiday, and they encounter a dying man in the woods. So, you've got this sort of obsessive mom, and this film is shot in 4:3 format, otherwise known as the square format, which was standard for TVs back in the day, back before they started releasing TVs in widescreen format. It's unusual for a film that was intended for theatrical release to be shot this way, and according to IMDb, it's accidental. The cinematographer mistakenly thought the film was being shot for TV, and the director was supposedly too drugged up to notice until they were halfway through shooting. It takes a little while for anything to really happen, but eventually the killings start, and there's supernatural stuff like psychic links and poltergeist kind of phenomenon, and this movie just goes right off the rails, and our killer is a masked slasher wearing a full-body samurai suit and kills with a katana while he glows. This movie's pretty out there. It's really weird in a good way and just keeps getting more and more bonkers until the completely wacky finale. As a slasher film, it's probably a bit disappointing, but man, is it fun. Did I mention that the ending fight scene is set to O Fortuna? This movie is sheer gonzo, and I'm into it. I admit that, like a few things on this list, it's not for everyone, but it's for me.
So there you have it, 10 lost slasher movies that I really enjoy most of. A lot of these were really fun to watch and fun to revisit. Some of these are definitely in that, like, oh my god, what am I looking at here? What is happening with this movie? But definitely a lot of crazy fun in here that was worth checking out. There was so many that I had set aside for this list that I have quite a few spillovers that I'm sure there'll be a sequel to in the future, because God, there was so many slasher movies in the 80s that were fun to watch and enjoyable to check out that I'm sure I will cover again here. But some good stuff that I would recommend checking out. If you have some other ones that you think are not talked about that frequently that you want to see mentioned, let me know down below in the comments. If you've seen any of these or intend to see any of these now, if I've convinced you that these are worth checking out, let me know that down below there as well too. Just click it out there. And also please share this video out there, hit that like button, subscribe to that channel, hit that little bell so you get the notifications, and you know, maybe check out the Patreon page like these guys over here have, because they're my patrons and they're awesome and they help support the channel. And you can too by going to patreon.com/movietimelines and kicking some funds over to help get more videos made. But you could also just keep on watching the videos. That helps also, so I appreciate that. And I'll see you very, very shortly for another great one. Thanks a lot, guys, and goodbye.